afternoon, everyone. It is 4:30, and we will call our work session to order. Order. So it is 4:30. We'll call this work session of the Scott County Fiscal Court to order. The purpose of this special called work session is to accept public comment on matters pertaining specifically to the proposed text amendment of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and then also the rural cluster development ordinance as well. It's all part of the zoning ordinance. So we have approximately an hour. At 6 o'clock, our planning commission will start a regularly scheduled meeting. So I don't want to put like a 4-minute time limit on anyone, but I would ask you to be conscious of others that might want to speak, and then just to the point. And we had a meeting late last week, and we heard from the Soil Conservation District, but would entertain any additional comments from the Soil Conservation District or anyone for that matter. So I don't want to make it real formal, but we do want to hear from anyone that wants to make comment in regards to these two matters. So with that said, I will open the microphone for anyone that would like to speak to either of these matters. Roy Cornett.
Harold Sims gave this to me a while ago. I started holding up asking, but just made 3 notes. On page 9 of 11, paragraph N, I had a question on there. Does this mean no farm exemptions available anymore? I'm talking about cluster. I'm sorry. I don't have anything about the accessory dwelling thing. Doc, you need to give me one about accessory dwellings.
Are the microphones on?
Yeah, the microphones are on.
Paragraph M is in Michael.
Philip, let me make sure that.
What'd you say, Cam?
Which paragraph did you say?
Did we get that on the email the other day?
All right. So I just had to, on page 9 of 11, paragraph N as in no, I just had the note here. Does this mean the farm exemption? The way it is now, anything over 10 acres, you've got farm exemption as far as any rules, as far as buildings and things go. Does this rule that out? Okay.
Oh, no, I was going to wait till I got all 3 questions.
Okay. All right, on page 10 of 11, paragraph U, says we got to let everybody know that, hey, it's an ag area, might be ag stuff going on, including hunting. The place I've got up in Indian Creek, I've got the tenants up there that shooting range. Now, honestly, a shooting range, does that fall under the auspice of the hunting thing? I'm not necessarily asking for an answer here. I've just raised the question. And then page 11 of 11, paragraph W, you had in the middle of that paragraph, you had is annexed. And I said, well, I assume it needs to be annexed by the city. All right. And then paragraph Y, it says all cluster lots shall have access to internal roads only, no direct access driveways onto public roads. The question I've got there, the whole intent of this was try to limit expenses. And the way it is now, you can put on 5-acre lots, you can have 1 driveway accessing 3 lots coming off the road. And this seems to be preempting that option. And paragraph AA, same page, 11 of 11, it's talking about soil maps, and it sounds like it's, the way it's written there, it sounds like we're encouraging clusters to be in the northern end of the county and the poor soils. But I think it's the other way around. We really were trying to protect the good soils in southern end of the county by using this. You might check that language there.
Would you say that again, Roy?
On paragraph AA, page 11 of 11. I was trying to read that verbatim, and it talks about, it looks like.
Yeah, I got it.
We're trying to encourage us to go to the poor soils. I think it's the other way around.
I got what I did. The 18th of May.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Roy.
So,
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll try to take those one at a time if I can remember. So the first one in N, no preserved acreage tracts created through cluster development shall be eligible for agricultural conditional uses as defined in section 4.12. That doesn't have anything to do with the building department or their farm exemption for putting up shops and buildings and things like that. That is our list of conditional uses allowed in the A1 or A5 zone. And so it shouldn't mess with that. Where that does come in is like a shooting range. So the allowed uses by right in the A1 zone are the residential structure and the agricultural use. Something like a shooting range could be a private or public park for personal enjoyment. And so that would be conditional. And so no, we would not want a new gun range being put up on the preserved acreage out on a cluster development.
Hold on, let me expand on that.
Sure.
This is an issue of Indian Creek Road. I own 70 acres on Indian Creek Road. I've got a couple gals that are gun fanatics. They get out there and shoot, and I'm talking about some pretty high caliber stuff, and it aggravates the neighbors. So, are we going to it's not an official gun range where you got people coming in like Cleaver is. It's a private property and stuff, but they're shooting all the guns. And I had a similar problem years ago on 25 when I used to have a horse motel up there at Sadyville. You know, people like to get out and shoot 100 rounds off.
And that's a different thing. If you're not inviting the public onto your property, that would be different from if you're just out there yourself and a buddy or whatever you're doing on your land. At which point, I do think that's why we have that requirement to include the plat note. That's just lets prospective purchasers know when you're next to an A1 farm, you're going to have just a different type of uses than if you're in a neighborhood.
Just to elaborate on that question, so a cluster, what would be the zoning on a cluster?
Yeah, the cluster lots are A5. The
Okay,
preserve.
A5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Preserved would still be A1.
Okay, but if there are, so it won't be in the R's, it'll only be A. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. Still looking ahead. The request for soils mapping. Previously, it was a requirement to submit that. We now just encourage it. The idea there being that, again, we don't require that of a standard subdivision, so it would not make sense to require it for a cluster subdivision, trying to equalize the path to development between a cluster and a standard subdivision. With that said, because clustering can help preserve agricultural land as well as open space more broadly, we, as an office, would encourage clustering on all portions of Scott County, not just the southern half or not just the northern half. What we're really looking for is if that soil map is provided, we would prefer that the cluster lots are on the less agriculturally productive area and not on the more agriculturally productive area. And then, Roy, what was the last one? I think we had one more. Roads.
Holden, can you make sure that microphone's on?
It doesn't project into the room, it's just for recording purposes.
Yeah,
So
but
It's on.
like,
it is on.
Yeah.
I had a
Green light.
person text saying they didn't.
Okay.
So we're trying to check back here, make sure it's being picked up back here.
Yeah. So for the last one, the roads, again, standard 5-acre subdivision. Yeah, you can punch a driveway off of the main road onto each one of those 5-acre tracts. We are trying to avoid that. We want one entrance or one, kind of road system that's going to serve all of the cluster lots, and then all of that's going to be connected internally. What Mr. Cornett's referring to is that you can access 3 residences before you have to build up to county road standards. And so we still wouldn't want those cluster lots being directly accessed off the main road. You, I think, could end up with a situation where you kind of have a pseudo, bulb road at the end, and then you're running your driveways off to the cluster lots. But with, again, these being smaller lots, you're not going to need, hopefully, driveways that are going to be as long. And so that's going to be up to the developer to figure out what that looks like. But no, we don't want cluster lots punching individual driveways out onto whatever your county road is. Yeah.
Trying to paint a picture of what I was talking about here. If we've got 3 5-acre lots accessed off one driveway, instead of 3 5-acre lots, we're cutting it back to 3 cluster lots of 1 acre to 2 acres. The whole idea of revising this thing is trying to encourage more clusters instead of 5-acre lots. And if we have to put a county road standard road in back to these cluster lots, that's increasing expense instead of cutting the expense. And what I'd suggest is if we have a gravel driveway accessing 3 cluster lots, or as opposed to 3 5-acre lots, it'd be one and the same. Does that make sense?
Like a hybrid version, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, just let's paint a picture. You've got Indian Creek Road, you run a gravel road back to 3 5-acre lots.
Yeah.
And that's legal today.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting have that same driveway, gravel driveway, accessing 3 parcels, but instead of 3 5-acre lots, it's 3 cluster lots that are 1 acre to 2 acres. And therefore, the expense of the lot, you're clustering, you're saving ag land, and you're not increasing the cost, as opposed to having to put a blacktop driveway into county road standards.
But at the same time, that remaining saved acreage would have to come off of a different,
Bingo, that's right.
different spot. You couldn't bring it off the gravel road, because that would create 4.
Yeah.
Then you have to blacktop.
That clarified a little bit?
Make sure you get your microphone on.
Ms. Jones, afternoon.
Hello, how are you? Rita Jones, I'm a farmer out on Old Oxford in Newtown, and I'm also a real estate agent. I'm the culprit of a lot of 5-acre tracts that are in this county, unfortunately. Wasn't my plan, wasn't my preferred thing to do, but I had farmers who needed income. It's a 401k. So I'm speaking in support of both of these ordinances that will help preserve our land and not throw away so much in 5-acre lots where people spend all their weekends, every weekend, mowing 4 acres they don't use. Back to what Roy was talking about, when you talk about the cost of a county road versus a gravel road, it is this much difference. And anything we could do that would allow maybe at the final approval stage or anything that would lessen the rules and not make them so strict would be best.
Mr. Willis?
Yeah.
Afternoon.
I sent y'all a letter, so
Received.
I kind of want to know if you have any questions of me about the letter. I don't need to rehash what I sent. So, and in addition to that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, can I interject here?
Yeah.
And it's really not a question for you, but it's in regards to your letter that with Holden. I think you were talking about septic tanks
Yes.
being on the reserve property, or the protected property. I've thought about that. And I see it both ways. So currently the way it's set up is that you can put a septic tank. So if I have a 2-acre house and my septic tank goes over onto the protected area, I could put a septic in that on that somebody else's or the mother property. Y'all call it the parent property, I think. The parent property, and it wouldn't technically be on my property. But let's walk through that for a little bit. So it's going to be protected in terms of it's going to be used for farming. It's just going to be septic tank. It's going to be over ground. What happens if you have to dig it up? Like, what if it fails and we have to go dig it up? You now have to go on somebody else's property then to fix it. So, and you brought that up in your letter,
Yes.
and I want to ask that question today. So, tell me what the Planning and Zoning Commission was thinking when you all allowed that.
So the last time that we talked about this, I had this chart that talked about the smaller you're able to make your lots, the more you're able to preserve. And so with 2-acre lots, it's very likely that you're going to be able to find suitable soil that's going to perk for you, and you're going to be able to put all of your septic infrastructure on your site.
With the set aside,
Yeah, with a 100% reserve.
100%
Yeah.
set aside.
Yeah, and so with 2 acres, it's very unlikely that you would run into that situation. Where that's likely to come up is as you get smaller than an acre, really anything even smaller than an acre and a half, you begin to run into a situation where you can't reasonably have your septic, have your drain fields, and have your 100% reserve all on your parcel. And so how do you then get smaller lots so that you can then preserve more acreage in aggregate? And so the idea is to allow that parent parcel to hold some of that septic infrastructure. Now, it's important to note that if this is like a community system that's serving multiple parcels all in the same area, that's going to get reviewed at the state level for the adequacy, and they've got their own set of rules and regulations that they're going to have to meet. But on the practical portion, the very last section in this ordinance, this is section BB, it includes the requirement that the homeowner's agreement must include language specific to the repair and maintenance of any shared septic infrastructure. And so in that situation, that's your answer. Is coming into it, we've gone ahead and we've drawn up that agreement, we've identified it on the parcel, we know what the rules for maintenance are going to be. Homeowners Association is going to play a role in that maintenance, and we want to make sure that everyone's kind of aware of it up front.
Yeah, and I understand it, and in the spirit of trying to preserve farmland and add as much farmland, and this is a way that we can expand, we can put septic on this area, but it can remain farmland. I understand it. Practicality part of it is I see there's problems that lie with that. Could be your failed septic system. You could have a farmer and a homeowner get upset. My farm owner, he's caved in my septic tank because he's driven over it and with his tractor and wagon. So I'm trying to think of ways that if that's all on your property, that situation goes away. And I'm just trying to troubleshoot this for the future. And I understand what you're trying to do.
And so what I'd put back to you is it worth it to try to figure out that solution? Because when you go from 1 acre lots, which are going to preserve, as it's written, 50% of the parent parcel, if you go down to half-acre lots, you're preserving 75% of the parcel. And so that's why I think it's worth it to anticipate and deal with that headache potentially, because you're picking up so much more acreage for that reserve. And the only way you do that, again, is with those smaller lots, and there's no way that you can fit septic on half an acre parcel.
Okay, let's talk about sewer. I know you all talked about annexation, and that's kind of what we think into the city currently, but we do have properties outside of the city limits that get sewer access. So in that event, we throw the septic tank and all that, they all goes out the door, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but you can still cluster, but now everything would be hooked to a sewer system.
Yeah, and then because again, the goal is just to meet the need, the sanitary need of the parcel. How you do that, we'll lean on our other departments to figure that out.
Okay. Yeah. That's all I had, Mr. Wills. I was trying to address one of your points.
That's fine. Were there any other questions anyone had? I do have 2 other things that I just want to raise up. One was brought up today, and I kind of want to reemphasize it. Should be the soil testing. I think logically, it kind of makes sense to require the soil testing so that their office because the soil testing's done, the report's written, their office is given the report, and they can make a more informed decision on what part of that large parcel should or could be developed without going over the sewer line onto somebody else's property, because they will utilize the best drainage areas for the homes. So they can, that informed decision. Otherwise, they're going in blind, and they're just, the builder can say, well, I want to build them over here. Well, okay, sounds good to me. So I just want to reiterate, I am in favor of that. And the last thing, I did not do any research on this. Literally, I'm cutting the grass the other day, and it came to me. So I haven't thought it out. But currently, I was not aware that you guys were losing ag property by having a 5-acre minimum building lot. It never even crossed my mind. And you said every time you build a house with 5 acres, you're losing 5 acres of prime land, prime property. And when you don't need it because the person only needs a smaller lot, he don't want to cut grass. If you were to amend or change the minimum lot size from 5 acres to 2 acres to build, each house you build, one, is going to be cheaper because the price of the home, the land is not being used up. And for each house you build, you're saving 3 acres of agricultural property, whereas now you're losing it. So I haven't thought it out, haven't run it by myself to analyze it, but I just wanted to bring it up since the meeting was scheduled for today. Thank you very much.
Judge, one thing.
Wallace.
So, Mr. Willis and I think Soil Conservation both brought this up. I think this had the 100-foot wide at the narrowest point. I think y'all used Brook Lane Estates, I believe, in your all's letter that you sent to us. So, and you brought that up as well as
Yes.
a concern. So Holden, can you walk us through the thinking about the 100 feet is the narrowest point that you can do that? Because I can see it will be attaching two larger parcels and just be connected so they could be contiguous. So what was the commission's thinking on that part?
Yeah, so the 100-foot came out of conversation at the Planning Commission meeting. I believe it was actually originally smaller than that, and we adjusted it up to 100 feet. But that did mean that 100 feet is big enough that you can get a tractor through and that you can move your agricultural equipment. Now, in Mr. Willis's letter that he had wrote, there was some questions related to this language that we have that talks about non-contiguous property cannot be tethered as preserved acreage. And I think what that's really doing is tying to that 100-foot minimum. I think if you've got 100 feet, that's us saying that that's big enough that you can actually utilize that land. And so if you have a funny shape where you've got a bulb up here and you've got a bulb here and you got 100 foot between them, maybe that makes sense. But anything less than 100 feet, it doesn't make sense to say that's one and the same. That non-contiguous tethering is language that's left over from the previous draft because they were trying to prevent, basically spaghetti strings running between pieces of land so that it could be considered as a preserve. If 100 feet for the minimum isn't the right number, then then I think you can increase that pretty easily. The bigger that number gets, the easier it is to say, yeah, those aren't tethered. That's actually just, a swath of land running between two fields. But yes, how did we end up with 100 feet? It was originally smaller, talked to the community, that number went up.
And it's just to transport, equipment through there. I understand. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Kelly Corman.
Mr. Wilson, if you don't mind, this comment you just made, I'm just trying to process in my head. So, say you went from 5 acres to 2 acres. Now, is this part of the cluster we're talking about, or you're just saying?
No. I'm just saying.
You're just saying if you turn 5 acres into 2 acre minimums, it would help.
It would help if you didn't do anything with a cluster.
Right.
This wasn't even a topic. If you changed it from 5 acres to 2 acres, you're saving 3 acres of agricultural property each time you have a house built. I think you need the cluster development legislation as well, because somebody smarter than me is going to figure out a way to abuse that and cause you problems.
Well, I'm thinking like if I own 10 acres and I sold 4 2-acre tracts, then I've sold 8 acres and I've preserved 2, and then I think it's getting back to what we're trying to accomplish with the cluster.
Yeah, and so I think what Mr. Willis is saying is you don't change the density, you only change the minimum lot size. And so for your 10 acres that you got, you get 1 dwelling unit per 5, so that's going to give you 2 parcels. You make one of them 2 and the other's now 8, and so you actually hold on to those extra 3 acres.
So you can't, I understand, okay.
Yeah, and so you extrapolate it out with 50-acre parcel, 10 lots. If 9 of them are 2, you're going to have 18 acres of development and 32 acres of preserve.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that would be 60% preserved.
Thank you.
I know more about septic tanks than I care to admit to. But Richard, Chad, most of the time you have septic tank problems, it's the tank itself or between the tank and the distribution box. And I'm just, what I've got visualized, that's going to be on the 2-acre or half-acre lot or whatever you got. The drainage lines are what's going to be out on the ag land. And there's not, as a general rule, you don't have any problems there very often. So does that help clarify your?
Yeah, I just don't, you understand what I was trying to do is try to prevent problems from happening
I
in the
understand.
future.
I just had the Bevins farm out here. We had a situation like it. A tractor went over septic tank, caved it in.
Yeah.
So it does happen, but it's going to be on the homeowner's lot, I would suspect.
I'd just like to say something about the septic systems. My husband's put in septic systems for 40 years. And all the subdivisions that were put in years back, 50 years ago, have failed. Etterwood had to go on.
They're on sewer, yeah.
Everybody tried to get him to do something. There was no room. Stonehenge, they're all failing. He gets called every day. Lancelot, he's repairing right now. They're all failing. When a system fails, there's all kinds of systems. There's infiltrators that you cannot drive on. Those are the round domes. There's rock systems, rock beds. There's filling weights. There's ponds that you put planks in. We've done all that. I think this needs, as an environmentalist, been into this because I think this is something very important. Once a system fails, you don't dig it up. You have to find room to put a new one in. The distribution box that Roy was talking about is very simple. That feeds each line the water. If you don't eat it, you don't flush it. How many people do that? Not very many. They have problems. Now, if you go with this, they can pump them, and it's going to cost them $300 to $500, but they're going to be pumping real soon. You put another 1,250-foot house, square-foot house on this property. If they're sized up by bedrooms, when you do that's how they're sized. A septic system is by how many bedrooms is in the house. There's 3 bedrooms, you get a bigger system. If there's 1 bedroom, you get a 1,000-gallon tank. If there's 3 bedrooms, you get a 15,000. And there's more lines. You have to have room to repair. And we're running into that problem. I just wonder if an environmentalist has been into this, it needs to be thought about. Thank you very much.
Question, Waco Health District met with Planning Commission, and I sat in on that meeting as well, just to discuss several of those aspects that you're bringing up, and those are real concerns.
And they didn't have a problem with it?
Well, I think
because they have them with us all the time.
Yeah, well, I think part of the language is that Holden, you want to speak to the set aside again?
So right now the language, this is section E of the cluster. The final plat of any cluster development must depict the area of all septic system installations as well as a 100% septic repair area. Those septic system installation areas and repair areas must be noted as non-buildable areas on the plat. And so this gives us, the length of the life of the first system plus a brand new area for the second system. And I think by indicating that these are no-build areas, we're trying to prevent somebody from putting up a shop or a shed or any of these other things that might encumber the property. Now, for the ADU side,
We have almost like an overlay on each parcel that
Yeah.
says no build.
no build, can't put anything there. And again, anytime that this, if a cluster development is using lots smaller than 1.75 acres, they've got to do all that work with WEDCO up front to make sure that the land is going to perk, to make sure that they will have enough area for that reserve. And so all that's answered before they even come into my office. And so we're trying to answer those questions before they come up. For the accessory dwelling unit thing, that was something else we were made aware of. You don't really tether two houses together, that goes to the state. So you will need, it's got to be a standalone system. So if you're talking about an ADU that's 1,250 square feet, like Ms. McDowell said, you figure out how many bedrooms are in there and you're going to size that appropriately. That's going to get installed at the same time that you're building that house.
I understand completely, like on a parcel holding that, where you're, like a 2 acre minimum, where you have enough room to have your field and then your repair zone. But if the developer wants to propose going on to the reserved area, will they also have to indicate, here's the field and here's the preserve for the repair
Yeah.
area? So that would be required as well.
Yeah, that would still be required. And in doing that, again, because that's a more complicated system that's going to get reviewed by the state, those are going to have to be answered up front before we take a look at it. The other thing that I think that we've done a good job in putting in here is if we're looking at putting field lines out into the parent parcel and then a 100% preserve area as well, we're still asking the developer to then increase the size of that preserve by 1 acre for every partial acre. Yeah, well, even half acre for acre, because if you're at 2.5, we want 3 more acres preserved. And so we're still covered there. And that will include the reserve area.
Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Dan Holman. So yeah, relating to the septic system here. So one thought is, this is a question about when you're going on to the preserved acreage. So it seems like, and maybe some experts could weigh in on it, like for septic systems, that's the septic tank and a leach field. And essentially, it's not usable land. Like, you don't want to grow vegetables on it. You don't want to have a dog park on it. You don't want to have like a playground equipment on it. You don't want to drive a tractor on it. From what I know or have seen, is just you grow turf grass without deep roots. You don't even want to graze chickens on it. Is not a good idea. So these are all questions to clarify. Like, is there any use for the preserve person to use that land other than just looking at this easement that they have on their property? So it almost seems like instead of putting an easement onto someone else's property, that should just be land that's owned by the homeowners association, that's a separate legal entity. And then you don't have the problem of the landowner like possibly damaging it. And the landowner has no value of owning that property if there's this very restrictive easement on it. So just one thing to think about is, why not just say any septic system, which is not just the tank but the system, is just land that should just be owned by the homeowner association as its own entity, and not make it an easement on someone else's property that doesn't even use it.
Thank you. Afternoon, Kane.
Kane Johnston. I'm a farmer out on Newtown Pike, and I'm also a real estate agent. And I would just like to point out, in my opinion, this whole amendment to this cluster has nothing to do with preserving farmland. That is not the number one goal, because we currently have a cluster development on a 5-acre rule, and you can put 20 houses on 100 acres. That'd be 20 acres, so you'd have 80 acres that you'd have to preserve. This new amendment that they're wanting to do is doing nothing but putting more houses out in the county on smaller parcels, because the developer, as Rita Jones says, can't pencil it on the current cluster development to make enough money. It's all about money. It's not about preserving farmland. And then Planning and Zoning asked the farmers, the Soil Conservation District, they said, well, to preserve the farmland, what smallest parcel do you recommend that we put in place for farmers to use? We suggested 40 acres. Planning and Zoning cut it down to 25. So if it was about preserving farmland, they wouldn't have cut it down in 25 acres. And when you're looking at what you preserve, say it's 25, 40 acres, what are you going to put? What farmer is going to utilize that, and what's it going to be for? It's more than likely not going to be for livestock, because nobody's talked about fencing, and probably whoever owns it's not going to put up the fencing because they're not going to make any money, or very little. So you're probably looking at row crops. So then you got to have people that's got to transport all the equipment. So I'm just not for it. I think it's you're preserving land the way it is now with the 5-acre rule. And if we don't want to sell as many 5-acre tracts, we can cut that back. Bourbon County has one driveway per 5 acres. You can't put a driveway with 3 separate houses on it in Bourbon County. And also in Bourbon County, you have to have 250-foot road frontage, unless it's already grandfathered in. So we make it easiest for anybody to come in here and develop the land that we've got. And something else we've got to think about is another thing is, when they first brought this up, they didn't talk about a half-acre lot and then putting septic systems on the parent property. Well, now they're wanting to put a half-acre lot, so how's that preserving farmland? It's not. It's putting more houses on a parcel of property. And if you go to put those other lots, or the septics on the parent property, what type of soil are you more than likely going to put that septic in? Probably the best soil that's out there, because it's going to need to drain the best, or you're going to have to bring soil in. So that's another factor that you could look at. It's just, I'm not for it. I don't see any good in it. And you've got to look at something else, not just preserving the land or getting more houses. On 100 acres, currently, if you do the 5-acre rule, you put 20 houses. If you go the 2-acre rule, that's 50 houses. That's 30 more residences in one piece of property. Now, how much more traffic, how many more cars is going to be driving up and down the road? You've got to have the adequate roads, and we don't have a lot of those in the county, because they're 1.5 lanes, if that you can get by. And you've also got to consider what people want in the county. When I was out campaigning, one of the biggest things they said is infrastructure is not in place. How much traffic is on Connector Road, and they just keep building and building, and the roads, it's going to be years before they even project it to get any bigger. They don't want, the public doesn't want to see so much more growth. And I'm not against growth. I'm not saying we're not going to have it. We're going to have it. But we can slow it down. But by putting these additional houses on a parcel of property is not going to slow it down. And it's all for the developer to make more money. Thank you.
Well, Kane brought up my name, so I had to answer that a bit. I have said for a long time that the current cluster rule does not pencil, meaning that you can't afford to do it currently under the current rules. So there has to be a change, or we won't have any clusters. How many clusters have been approved in the last 5 years? 0. That's why. You cannot even afford to do it under the current rules. So if we want to do anything to keep people from mowing 4 acres of wasted farmland, this is the answer.
Darcy.
Hi. I'm just going to kind of piggyback off of what she said. If we keep our current rule, and I explained it last time, and do the 5-acre rule, and then we times that, if we do 100 acre, and that's 20 times it by 1.5 acre units, then you will get 30. So you're increasing that density. With the parent track, because they were talking about the 50%, what would be the minimum for 50%, and it was 40, went down to 25. I went back and I was trying to read in the old, or the current one right now. We haven't changed it or anything, and I haven't seen anything on minimum. But if we just use the current rule, it doesn't matter what your size is. And you did an example with the 10 acres. So then you would have 2 houses and you would save 8. So if we still did the current rule, and even if you times it by 1.5, and you might put an additional 3, on there, but you're still saving it. So it doesn't matter about the size of the farm. You can still preserve farmland or some open space. But if you put a minimum on there, what you're doing is if you have, 100 and you did the old rule is 50%, but then you have 25, 25, 25, 25, which we've already discovered there's a house which is open, just a big yard with one house. So it's just something to consider. I think I said this, but to keep it one tract, no minimum, just the parent tract will be whatever acres it is. And that's what it is. Because truly trying to preserve it, and you think about it, I've been thinking about this. I've been married 32 years, and I came into Georgetown, and when I came, there's only two stoplights. And look how much, and if you think in 30 years, how much we have grown and has expanded and all this stuff. And when I came in here, Georgetown, there was farms. You go on 25, and where the post office is and stuff, that was a farm over there. And you go down a little bit further, there was a farm right over there. I mean, you had all these, farms that were so quaint and everything, and then all of a sudden, we're just building. And if we don't do something now, in 30 years from now, we won't have the acreage to continue to do any farming. And food security, they're already talking about that in the federal level and stuff. So really we need to kind of tweak this a little bit more and kind of talk about it and just kind of figure out some things that work and everything, just kind of tweak it before we go, in my opinion, just to go forward and stuff like that, because once it gets approved, it's hard to go back and change it. We're in this stage right now that we can still do some things and tweak this. So that's what I say.
Darcy, I have a question. So you're suggesting there be like a metric put in place, but it should not have 25-acre minimum. It could be
right, because right now it's just the 5-acre rule, and then you have your cluster, and then you have your acreage, and then the rest of it is the parent tract. But don't put any minimum on there. That parent tract is what it is. Whether it be
the 10-acre example that they talked about earlier.
Then the parent tract would be 8. With 2, it's 8. Don't divide it up. Say if the minimum was 4, and then you have 2 4s, and then they get sold as 2 4s. Just keep it as 8, and it's preserved. It's for, potential of doing agriculture, producing our food, because our food doesn't come from the grocery store. We get out there and feed those little suckers.
Thank you.
So if I could, I'd just like to talk through how we ended up at 25 for the minimum, and then I would like to talk a little bit about the idea of is it just one parent parcel, or should be one cluster reserve, or should you be able to do multiples? So with the 25-acre minimum, originally Planning Commission, I think, or staff recommended a very small minimum, something like 10 acres of preserve. And then in conversation with the Soil Conservation Committee and then other agricultural stakeholders, the draft that was originally brought to the Planning Commission was for 40-acre minimums. One community member in particular, Mr. Stephen Price, felt that by having a 40-acre minimum, you really were pushing one particular type of agricultural, one type of agriculture to the detriment of others. And, he was very passionate, and that you don't need 40 acres to farm. That was his opinion on that. The way staff looks at that is if, again, under the current regulation, if we preserve 50%, you're going to have double the acreage of whatever that reserve tract is starting out. And so with 25 acres, you've got a 50-acre parcel. Anything less than 50 acres isn't eligible for clustering the way it's currently designed. And if a parcel isn't eligible for clustering, that means the only way that it can be split or subdivided is by going through the standard 5-acre subdivision process. And so staff just doesn't feel comfortable saying you need at least 80 acres for us to think that it's worth preserving. What I would venture is if the body is looking for ways to tweak this, is I think 25-acre preserve, if you can divide a 50-foot parcel and end up with a 25 and then 25 acres of development, that's something that we should be trying to do. But if we have these large parcels, something like 200 acres coming in on the front end, maybe that's where you say 40 acres minimum, or some other metric that you guys can think about. Where if we've already got a very large parcel and it's fresh and it's coming in, maybe that's where we can say we need those larger preserve minimums. I want to talk just really briefly about why staff is not in favor of allowing any parcel to be clustered. And what that really comes down to is actually the same thing that we've heard from our agricultural community, which is agricultural viability. If you come in with a 10-acre parcel and you cluster it, and you say, I want a 2 and an 8, that 8 is for all intents and purposes really similar to a 5. You're not likely to farm it. And so that's, if you have 15 acres and you cluster it, whatever you put that number at, the minimum that we felt like we could do something with, originally staff was if you got a 20-acre parcel. And part of that too is cluster developments are considered major subdivisions. They require a rezone. And this is going back to why we originally said 10 acres of preserve. A standard subdivision has to create 4 parcels for it to be considered a major subdivision. 4 times 5 is 20. That would be rezoned A5. Or alternatively, if you clustered it off, then you get 4 parcels, which is in the regulation. That would be a major subdivision. So you'd have 10 and 10. We've increased that. I feel like I just muddied the waters a little bit there. But essentially what we're looking at is we want there to be options for parcels that are 50 acres and above that don't have to go through a standard 5-acre subdivision. If we can find a number that it makes sense to say we want 50 to be able to cluster down into 25. If it's a very large parcel, we want those preserve tracts to be 40. I think that would be a great solution. Now, the reason why that we're okay with separating that preserve area into those separate, kind of preserve tracts is, number one, we stick a development unit with it. And so if the developer wants a couple larger parcels, 25 or 40, it doesn't really matter. They have to put a house on that parcel. It's taking away from the smaller lots that you're looking at. The other thing is there might be situations where with these larger parcels, maybe they front off of 2 roads. And so it makes sense to have a cluster on one side and a cluster on the other side. Maybe there is an opportunity for just a flexibility in the layout that you want to have 2 different preserved tracts or acreage. And maybe you're doing that because you have your prime soils are in 2 different areas. But what I do know is the most flexible we can be in accomplishing this goal is how we're going to be able to actually utilize this tool. If we create a very strict, stringent set of rules, then we're going to be having the same conversation in 20 years where we haven't seen this taken advantage of, and we were going to continue to go down that path of 5-acre subdivisions. That's staff's perspective. So, any questions?
I just want to share some data again. And Whitley has been...
Did you get the updated numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Whitley is very... her works are very appreciated, and I originally shared data and from 2010 through September of 24. And in 2010, from Whitney's research, there were 1,431 5-acre tracts in Scott County in 2010 in the A1 zone. Let me qualify that. Now, in 2026, there are 1,891 parcels compared to the 1,431 in 2010. So that's a difference of 460 parcels over that time span. The total acreage difference that we're talking about is 2,128 acres. So, that 2,128 acres, there is not any ag going on there, period. And I think I do believe that, we have an existing cluster development ordinance that's not being used. And a lot of comments, a lot of work has gone into this to see if, in fact, this would positively impact having more, being able to add houses, but at the same time being able to add farmable land that's not just sitting there being mowed for grass. So, I think the goal of this is to be able to look back in 5-10 years and compare and see if this has worked. And we can, 100% the truth is, once you do something, it's like once you put the toothpaste out of the tube, it's very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube. But there's nothing saying that we can't enact an ordinance and then come back in 2 years and see, hey, has anything happened? Are there any cluster developments on the books being developed? I do not think we will see some tsunami of cluster developments. I don't believe that. And, I think you'll see some additional options. But if we do nothing, what's that helping? And, I think everybody that, we've spent a lot of time and listened and had several meetings. And this was the low-hanging fruit in the consensus of trying to look at it. And nobody in that room, in any meeting that we had, wanted to increase the minimum lot size without some type of financial considerations. And that's just not, there's no source for that. So I want to know that, I want everybody to know that, this has been a genuine process to try to work through and listen and get input from the community, but at the same time try to move us forward where we can have a little bit more balance. That was the data that I wanted to share.
Judge, can I add just one more data point? And this is, again, talking about what you want your minimum preserve tract to be. In the last 5 years, we've performed 183 subdivisions in the A1 zone. Of those 183, with a 50-acre parent tract, there's been 83 parcels that had at least 50 acres that came into my office to be subdivided. So approximately 45% of them, if we had this proposed cluster development regulation, could have qualified. They could have opted for the cluster. If you bump that up to 80 acres, which is a 40-acre preserve tract, then only 51 would have qualified. So that's 27%. And so that's, again, when we're talking about it, you're right. Not everyone's going to qualify for this, basically, no matter how we write it up. I don't think we're going to see that tsunami. But you're looking at really a 20% difference in the eligibility of the parcels coming in if you do 50 versus 80.
And one thing that hasn't been brought up that was mentioned at the last meeting was that, Holden, tell me if I'm correct, the preserved land cannot be further subdivided.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, is the possibility of putting requirement for a conservation easement or being a part of an ag district that would prevent annexation, which is, if you look at the 2010 to 2028, the annexation, that's a whole different story. I think everybody, that's a whole different story. So, and I've talked to Cam about language in here. Would that require us to send it back to you all? Your opinion is yes.
Yeah, well, I think the best practice, based on the research I've done, would be that if, fiscal court can make amendments to this, but any substantive amendments that change or substantially add to what the planning commission has sent to us probably need to be sent back to the planning commission for further review and consideration, because the statute requires that any text amendment go through that process, and we would be essentially adding more language they haven't reviewed yet. So right now, what the ordinance said, I think maybe Roy brought this up, is that what you said would stay in place. There would be a conservation easement. However, if it could terminate upon annexation, you're kind of saying we don't want that. We want to change that.
That's counter to what
Which
we're.
is fine.
Yeah.
You probably need to. You could propose that amendment and send it back for consideration, and then they may take no action, or they may say fine, or whatever.
Could we pass this? Could we pass this as is, or as whatever and could we come back
Consider it for the further amendment.
for a further
We did that,
amendment,
Yeah, that might be simpler.
like to make it just like?
Yeah,
Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
instead of sending the whole thing back. Yeah,
Instead of sending the whole thing back, just immediately.
and that I think that's a good idea. And then this is the only proposed amendment I've heard bandied around, but I don't know if anybody else is going to bring up more.
And that's why we're having this meeting, to
That's
listen,
happened
and,
before,
and we discussed at our last meeting, having this meeting for public comment, and then shooting for a first reading on the Thursday, the 25th. No, not tomorrow. No, that's too quick. But you felt like, Ryan, I don't want to put you on spade. You're the one that brought up the annexation piece, and I thought that was a real point.
And I don't know. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if it would prevent annexation, but if it was annexed, it would still be subject to
No,
that.
it's still subject to that.
Yeah.
It's still subject to that conservation easement.
Yeah, or agriculture.
They can annex it, it's great, but you can't build on it.
Yeah.
So,
Bowling Green is a good example. Bowling Green allowed utilities outside their city limits. They've got donut all the way around outside their city limits. Bowling Green, the city cannot grow out anymore. And so saying you cannot annex is going to create the potential that donut you're talking about. You don't want to do that.
well, all I'm saying is, if a rural cluster development that application went through the process, all I'm saying is on the preserved land,
For it to remain preserved.
we want it to remain preserved.
I hear you, and I'm okay with that, except, I'm just trying to make an example here. Tracy Highlanders farm out here on Lemons Mill,
Bradshaw property,
Bradshaw Farm,
beautiful.
beautiful farm. If we say it cannot be annexed, and if he did something on it, it can't be annexed, then it can't be annexed, it could never be developed on. He's got 50 acres there or thereabouts, right here essentially in town. Now, I don't think we want to pass a rule that precludes that from happening.
No, all we're saying is that they can annex it, but if they want to do a rural cluster development in the preserved acreage, that preserved acreage has to be subject to a conservation easement or part of an ag district.
I don't think you want that into perpetuity.
This might be the reason why you want to kick it back for this discussion and review.
But Roy, my reasoning is that we're trying to allow for some housing units to be built, but at the same time, saving, some good
It's not a problem. You
farmland.
go out to Stamping Ground Road, Cynthiana Road, that's not a problem. I'm just talking about you get around here close to the confines of Georgetown that, and out, beyond our lifetime, we grow out to, and also we've got something saying it can't be developed in perpetuity, it'd be a problem. For example,
What if where the post office had done this
Bingo,
20 years
bingo,
ago?
yeah.
We'd have a farm set in the middle of Georgetown. We've got to look 50 years out and where our city limits will be and think about that as a long-term situation. I don't think we want to put unless you want to build a big park in the middle of Georgetown, I don't think that would work. I farm up against developed properties. It's not pretty all the time to farm against developed properties. It's not what everybody would like to do. There's trash, there's kids, there's bicycles, there's complaints about my horses laying down too long, that kind of thing. So keep all that in mind.
Can you have your cows go over there to do their business?
Oh, when a cow reaches under a fence, she's going to die, when she's trying to get a blade of grass on the other side of the fence.
But please, I'm sorry for interrupting, but please know that I'm just trying to promote a balance.
I know.
And what you all are talking about, I don't discount what you're saying.
And we're trying to get to a stopping point of getting something in writing so we can move forward. Back to Judge Covington's comments about how many 5-acre tracts. The sadder fact is, of all those 5-acre tracts, I bet 90% of them don't want that. They didn't want 5 acres to start with. And now they're saddled with this, that they don't. And as you get older, you don't want to mow so much. So it becomes an issue that way. The septic issue. I farm over some septic tanks that are on my farm. As long as the tank is usually within 10, 15 feet of the house, it's the leach line that's out on the farm. If you've got a septic easement, that means you can go over there and work on that legally. I plant corn right over top of mine, no issue. So just a little bit of personal.
Thank you. Some comments, Judge.
And yes, Mr. Jones.
So our current regulations that we have, I was part of writing that ordinance when I was on P&Z, and we thought it was going to save farmland. Ms. Jones has stated that nobody's using it, and that's obvious. Matt Welch is probably the only one that's used it in the last 15, 20 years. The new regulation that we have is going to be used, who knows? It's a toss-up. It's like you said, we got to guess on something. But here's my problem with the new regulation. We got 100 acres. 50 acres goes into into the conservation, right? Right. The current regulations, you get one housing credit for every 5 acres. So it's 20 houses you can build. The max that those lots can be is 2 acres. So instead of saving 50 acres, we'd be saving 60 acres on our current regulations. Now, I know nobody's using our current regulations, but our current regulations are going to save more land than what the proposed regulations are going to save.
But here would be my question, Rob. And so if you take somebody that maybe looks at doing a cluster, or they just sell 5-acre tracts, because you can still sell 5-acre tracts. I think that if you owned a big farm and you try to track it out and do a bunch of 5-acre tracts, then the cluster would have been a good idea.
It could, but you would have to go to the regulations that they're proposing, which you're going to lose land.
I'm just saying right now, if somebody says they don't want to do the current, which they're not, I mean, it's been 15, 20 years since we've done one. It's like, well, I'll just try.
Are we worried about saving land, or are we worried about building houses?
Well, I'm just saying, like, the other alternative is I've got 2,000 feet of road frontage on my farm, and I'm just going to track out a bunch of 5-acre lots because I don't like the current cluster. So I think you'd lose more farmland by a farmer doing that than if they had something they thought was more reasonable. And I know what you're saying, but I think when you look at your options, if you own that land, like, what are you going to do?
So here's another thing I thought about too. So if I've got 100 acres, I don't know, say I get $10,000 an acre for it, right? $1 million, right? What if I can sell 5-acre tract every year and get $100,000? That's enough to live on for a while. Same thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
The $1 million, you're gonna pay more taxes on it first. up front.
But what you're talking
capital
about
gains.
is like what we're trying to prevent, right? Like
And I could
just
still
subtracting
farm
off 5 acres.
I could still farm all that until I decide I'm done farming. You know what I mean?
Right.
Let's get that extra $100,000 in my pocket every year, if I wanted to.
But help me understand why you feel like the proposed language in the amendment is not preserving.
Because it says it right there, 50% of it is all you're preserving. 50%. So that's 50 acres.
But 50 times 0 is 0. I mean, right now, we're just doing 5-acre lots. And if you
But
have
we're not getting rid of the 5-acre lot rule. They can still do 5 acres if they want to.
and they can, but this could be
And it could, I'm not gonna argue it can, I'm just saying.
I'm just
They can still do the 5-acre rule and then times it by 1.5, and you get more housing, which will then help Fiscal.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing
You can
is
cram them together a
increasing
little
the
smaller.
density of the cluster. So with the current 5-acre rule, if you add the 1.5 acres, you've increased the density of that acreage that is set up for the cluster. And that's what they're doing, but they're doing it at 50%. Whereas if we use the current rule, the 5-acre rule, and times it by 1.5, you're getting more housing in that.
Which I'm fine with acre lot down to that size. We'll save as much farmland as we can, whatever it
5-acre
takes.
rule, once you get to 4, right, becomes subdivision. Then they have to build subdivision roads and subdivision, like, it's not feasible economically to do that, like, what you're.
That's if
what
they
you're
don't
saying.
have, that's if they don't have the road frontage.
Well, like, once you get back in there, you're gonna have to do something.
Once you get in there, yes.
So I think that's where it's money-wise.
Mr. Howard, you've been very patient.
So I just really urge everybody to look at that 40-acre minimum again, okay? Farm, most of my income is farming. I do work other than that. But you start dropping those numbers below 40 acres. You know, cattle market looks great right now, but it's not always going to be. Corn and beans definitely haven't been, but even on a small scale as 40 acres, going to be very tough. There's still going to be that niche for that 50-acre farm if they want to break it up into 5 acres, okay? But I would urge you to keep those numbers from that 80-acre for the mini cluster, which I think is a good tool to have, okay? And if we can keep that 40 acres, and possibly, what if the farm next to it's 50 acres, you know? Whoever rents that 40 acres or purchases it, they might be able to rent that if that owner doesn't. I think it gives the whole country, the whole community a little bit more buffer area. And even as Rita said, you know, even if the Ford farm, which is where the post office is, even if it was left as a set-aside portion of that land, what's so bad about having a park in the middle of town as big as this town has grown since? That has just been developed. So I'd really look at that 40-acre really hard, in my opinion. And, I mean, that's really heartfelt. I got 3 pieces of property that are 50 acres and below, nothing major by no means, but, you know, I'd hate to see those even broken up. And I bought one of them in 4 tracks, and I've yet to sell one of them. Hope I never do, but, you know, but just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Philip. With that said,
I've got one other thing.
yes, sir.
Pertaining to the 5-acre lots, y'all worried about people buying 5 acres and saying they don't want to mow it. Well, if they didn't want to mow it, they wouldn't buy it. As many subdivisions are going up in town, they can buy a house in town. But people buy 5 acres because, one, it's the minimum lot size in the county. I mean, we could, if you're worried about selling 5 acres, we'll up it. Woodford County did and Fayette County did, and I'd be all in favor for it. That preserved more farmland. But people buy the 5 acres because they want to be out in the county and they don't want to be around a bunch of neighbors that are right next to them. I mean, Joe Pat, you got 5 acres. Kelly, you got 5 acres, and you got horses. So everybody, you know, there's a lot of people's got horses on 5 acres and to raise a garden. So you can't just say people buy it and then they don't want to mow it, because if they didn't want to mow it, they wouldn't buy it. They got other options.
You all, it's Roger Quarles has stood up, so I will recognize the gentleman from Lemon's Mill, and we'll conclude after Roger's comments.
Thank you all. I am Roger Quarles. I farm a little bit of the county here and there. I said I farm a little bit. I wish we could go and approach this situation, well, to start off with, I guess we learned more about the existing cluster rules than I ever knew, which is good. Some of that was here before Holden came, and some of that failed under the past director, such as the fences. But I wish we could approach this thing for any changes to be for benefit of the agriculture and not for the benefit of builders. When you look at changes, look at agriculture first, and whatever happens to the builders, let that be the minor side of it. I want to talk about the fence a moment. The way it's written, I think the A5s have to be fenced. I would encourage you to have the fence put in prior to constructions. I think today they finally finished the very first 6-foot fence that's ever been built in the county under the rule that's 3 years old. I think they finished it today. But at any rate, why would
is that on US 25? Is that on US 25?
Yes. Yes, it's been built 3 times before. I think they may have it right. But what I would ask anybody here, why would you not have the fence put in first? It's not going to be any cheaper 2 years out as it is today. So why not have the developer just do it first? Just write it into the rules, period. It actually helps because it doesn't interfere with any construction. Everything's wide open. You can get to it and be done with it. They ran into a problem out here on 25 because they'd already put in field dirt and they couldn't make the machines work right. But I would encourage that. The sewer situation, it needs to be on the deed of the house. The equipment we run, a semi-truck is going to weigh 80,000 pounds. If it runs over something, if it's the least bit wet, it's going to smash it. The grain carts are hauling 600 bushels of corn, plus the giant tractor to pull them with. It just doesn't work, and it's going to cause damage. And then, then we got arguments galore on that. And then the other part of it, I'm worried that somebody might buy the preserved area and not even be aware of the easement that was given to the sewer thing. Typically, when you get a deed, and the lawyers can correct me here, you get a deed, it'll state easements of record, but not particularly identifying what those easements are. I think they typically may be in the miscellaneous book. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, they get lost as time passes. And as things change and get sold, the next guy doesn't know about it. But certainly, if you put easements over there, it's going to diminish the price of that property and the use of that property. But the machinery we run over it is so heavy, it's just a problem that's going to occur. So keep it back on whoever owns the lot or the homeowner group. Let them take care of the problems. We're going to switch from 60% to 50%. I'll echo the 40-acre rule. I can tell you that typically 40 acres is actually a small type of parcel to operate on, especially if you've got, any type of farming that you do. I know it's a big thing for a garden, but most of it is not garden. How many, we've got like three of those outfits here in town, and that's all. Everybody's got an opportunity to do it, but they haven't, except for those few. But yeah, we need to stick with the 40-acre minimum with one parent tract. Don't be dividing up the parent tract. Keep it all in one situation. If you have to do 100 foot to get over to the rest of it, I could swallow that. But it needs to be in one parent tract. Don't be letting them divide up the preserved area in smaller things. It just needs to stay together. And the judge mentioned something about 2 years out. I would even encourage, whatever you change, to put a 2-year sunset on it that will make you come back to it and after 2 years. Put a sunset on it to where you're not carrying on, such as you've got right now with the current cluster regs. They're there, and how hard is it to change that? Well, that's what you're doing today. But time passes, so why not just put a sunset on the thing 2 or 3 years out and make it come back before the court and the planning commission, make it come back here. I like that. I do that on my farm every day. If something doesn't work, I don't give it 2 years. I fix it pretty quick, or try to anyway. But I would encourage that. Other than that,
Thank you for your comments.
the stakeholder meetings we had, when we had those, we did not meet to determine or to promote a bonanza for builders. We were focused strictly on agriculture, and I'd like for us to, keep that in mind when we do this. If it needs to go back to them for something, I'd rather do that than give a bonanza out here for a bunch more houses in the county.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments. We'll conclude our workshop.